Okay. Thank you, Dr. John. Appreciate that.
No extra charge.
So here's the first polling question. Why do you team with other consultants? A single choice. They brought the client or opportunity, need for discipline, specific knowledge, resource requirement, short-staffed, trial run with prospective team member, enjoy sharing the wealth, or other. And if you do an other, you got to let me know what that might be. And of course, I can't vote because I'm the host here. And I'll just give it another minute or two. This is a real good question. So, Bill, where are you today? Are you in state of Washington, I think?
Yes, I'm in Red State, Washington. Kennewick.
Ah, okay, fantastic. People are still voting. Okay, stop voting already.
Okay, question one was single choice.
That's true. Okay, well, let me end the poll. Thanks, everybody. Let me share the results. Come on. Okay. And then you can see that number 2 seems to be the most popular here with specific knowledge, followed by number 3, short-staffed, 4, I'm sorry, followed by number 5, 6, and 1 is tied. So 2 people voted for others. So would anybody like to share what the other could have been?
All of the above.
Oh, okay. Who said that?
Jody, your business manager.
Oh, thanks, Jody. Yeah, that's true.
Hello?
And I
Oh,
was
okay.
the other.
Okay, John, and what was your thought there?
Well, my problem is that I live on this isolated island, and so far I haven't had any opportunity for joint ventures. And I'm sitting here wondering, what the hell did I do? Have I got bad breath or something?
No, you're too far west for that. Well, hopefully we can talk about that today, and Bill's going to share a little bit on what to do with that and how we're going to promote that towards the end here. So thanks for that, John. So partnering number 2, second question, how do you get work? Is it by invitation to contract from a referral, or is that you develop the lead over time, or Rainmaker, third-party development, responded to a formal RFP. Oh, by the way, top 2, if you don't mind, sorry. Work order from pre-qualified listing. Oh shit, is that John?
That's John.
John, we can hear you. Or Magic, a unicorn brought it in. I like that one. But please select your top 2. And just waiting for a little bit here. Yeah, this is a little bit of a tougher one. I think people have to think about this one a little bit. Okay, just waiting for a couple of votes here, and we will close it out. So, Fran, what's your thought on this?
Oh, it's always referral for me.
Yeah.
That's the best lead you can find is referral.
Those are the best ones, absolutely.
Hey, Steve, your poll is not showing your results.
No, I didn't end the poll yet. That's why, Bill.
Nope.
Okay, no, but let me share the poll. Hold on, just waiting. Oh, so here's the results here. Thanks everybody for voting. So invitation from a referral is the number 1, coincidentally, Fran. What did you vote? Did you vote 5 times or something? No, I'm just kidding.
No, there wasn't all of the above. I didn't vote. No.
Right. Develop the lead over time. Number 2 that's followed by number 2, followed by number 4 and 5, responded to a formal RFP. Magic. So, okay, so who voted Magic and why?
I did, Laura here. I don't know what's going to happen with me since I'm coming back into the world after the 5 years. So I need magic.
There you go. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thanks everybody for that. let me finish this. Okay, so let me go on here. A big thank you to Robert Handel last week from LDI. He did a fabulous job on SaaS, cybersecurity posturing and strategies. We're working on actually a give out to all of the SCTC members. I asked him to develop a checklist, and we're working on that together, and that should be out shortly. A famous quote. This is actually, well, it's actually, somebody can tell me what this is. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? Who was that? Okay, you
Scully?
ready? It was Steve Jobs who was persuading John Scully at the time to become the Apple CEO.
Mm-hmm.
So John Scully happened to be the CEO of Pepsi at the time. So, so Steve Jobs is saying, how can I get him over to my side? And so do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want to help change the world? So John
With
lasted there
Coca-Cola,
obviously
I was
several years, but
close. Nice quote.
oh,
I
okay, yeah,
like it.
that's very close. All right. Thanks. So, yep. So this week we have Bill Doolittle. Bill, where'd you get your picture? I love your picture, by the way.
Truth be told, I fed that through an AI portrait software. It's actually much better than the
Seriously?
pictures I took. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Fine.
Thanks.
And of course, I'm wearing the shirt that I took the picture in.
Yeah. Did you have to do a lot of editing, or did you just let the AI do it for you, or how did that work?
Oh, it's wonderful. For just a few dollars, it gives you about 30 or 40 different choices. And in fact, some of them put hair on me. It was really kind of funny to look at those. And then you just pick the half dozen that you like and go with it.
So what was the name of that software? Do you remember offhand?
It'll be the one that keeps pestering you on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, if you can remember that, just let me know. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks. So the SCTC membership drive ended on June 30th. Okay, just a couple of days ago. And really, it's now complete. And we really want to thank everybody who brought individuals in, or recommended individuals. Fran is now leading the charge on following up on all those. So really, we could not have done it without anybody who really contributed here. And, we also now have a sense of momentum as we are continuing to grow the membership, and we're really encouraging all to continue to recommend and bring in new members. Maybe you're not going to get the grand prize here, but the idea of growing our organization to become even more influential is key to our growth. And I can tell you the fact that, in our world, we just brought in 2 SCTC specialists who were actual programmers, and without the SCTC, I couldn't have gotten the work. So, I mean, partnering really works as one example, but again, through growth and through partnering and through, additional members, we'll have more options to do that. So this is great. So thanks to everybody for doing that. Dave Clardy, are you on today by chance? I know you were traveling. So Fran, any update from Dave's side there?
Yeah, I did not hear from Dave, but as far as the happy hours, absolutely every other week for members. And you guys, we got some new folks here. Get to know the members. It won't be this week, but it'll be next week. And as far as engagement, make sure you register for the conference because it's turning out amazing. I think we've just about got all the VAT gold slots filled, and those are getting all organized. So if we have any left over, that'll be open for the rest of the organization. And make sure you register for the conference. Thanks, Steve.
And I heard there's a rumor that the Siptones might be showing up at some point.
Well, I know
It's
the
a
security for Siptones is definitely going to be there.
Okay, great. And Mike, over to you, our president.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great day. I just want to wish everybody happy 4th of July. I want a big thank you to the back members. We do have 1 slot open for the speaking slots, so we appreciate that. So, folks, all the consultants to sign up for the conference. It's going to be a great conference. So, look forward to seeing everybody at that time. So, have a great rest of the week. Thanks, Steve.
Exactly, Art. Yeah, I had that idea, and we're going to do that today, Art. So thank you. So here, let me introduce Bill Doolittle. I'm going to stop my share, and Bill actually has you've done some serious homework on this, Bill. And no, it's great, and it's great material. He and I have gone through it together. We do encourage everybody to ask Bill some questions or have some comments around this today. To uh, uh, again, stimulate the. So, Bill, with that, I will give you the share there.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
I'm
Thank
still
you.
navigating screens. So what I tend to do is put a PDF up here because PowerPoint and presentation software sometimes doesn't interact very well. So this is intended to be kind of interactive. That's kind of what the way the fireside chats go. This was in response to Steve reaching out to me to say, we'd like you to present. What do you want to talk about? And I had two topics, and this is the one that he favorited. And it was based on a recent experience. So as we get into the presentation, I'll talk about a case study for why you should be teaming. Right now, the market is very interesting. I'm going to describe. Sorry.
Bill, I totally apologize. I didn't realize that Kai was on today. Kai, is it Cal or Kai? I'm sorry, Cal. Just give me 2 minutes here. Kyle, you don't have any slides, do you? I don't have your slides today.
I sent you slides last night, Steve. Probably too late.
Oh, okay.
For
So
you.
okay, so Kyle, why don't you just speak briefly about your firm? I'm sorry, Kyle is a new VAC member. I'm sorry, Bill. I totally forgot about this. And yeah, just introduce yourself if you don't mind, okay?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. Bill's topic today leads right into my introduction, actually, because it is literally how my career started, right? It was around somebody reaching out going, hey, can you help with X? That happened to be in the Avaya stack. And 20 years later, it's like, holy moly, I've been doing delivery for services delivery for so long. Went from being a developer to an owner of ASA Solutions, and then exited that after seeing that grow a number of years. Have taken over StarTech, and that's how I'm affiliated with this group now, doing IT staffing and partnering, delivering the right people in the right way. In
And
any
I found your
different,
slides. Sorry.
in
Here
any
you go,
different way.
Cal.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. And really, honestly, I will just say again, I think what Bill's going to talk about today leads right into kind of what we can help. So, the next slide. So, I'll send out a summary if that's okay, and I'm kind of looking forward to Bill's talk here today.
That's great. All right. Anything else, Cal?
No, I think that's good. Thank you, guys.
Okay. And sorry about that. That was our mix up. Okay, Bill, now you can put your back.
We're nothing if not adaptable, right?
Exactly. Well said. Well said.
So anyway, the thought for my presentation today was to talk about market and how to eat an elephant one spoonful at a time, I guess is the best way to characterize this. So, and thank you, Steve, for being so astute to notice that I did put some research into this, and that is my obsession. And the most talked about question in my interviews about what's my biggest flaw is like, I want to know more. And so I did a lot of internet searching. I leveraged some AI stuff. And I was curious about the management consulting marketplace. And of course, management consulting from a global perspective talks about the big 4 or 5 or 6 consulting firms. Certainly we're much more discipline specific. But a couple of takeaways. The consensus would be that this is between a $1 billion and a $1 trillion market. And so that's a huge swing. So the footnote here is that, these are all providers of reports that you can purchase. And so be careful, buyer beware. But also you kind of get curious about how they are coming up with their numbers. The other takeaway is that they're all unanimous in that we're in a growth market. And I don't know about anybody else, but to quote a line from a movie, life is hard. Finding work is very difficult, particularly in this climate today, particularly in the domestic US market. So I'd like to think optimistically that we're chasing a market that will absorb us. So having said that, how do we consume that? So boutique consulting firms, which is basically what we are. We're not Bain, we're not McKinsey, we're not all the rest. We're small firms, and so I'm speaking to small firms. What you're going to hear is also Bill's perspective on the world. I don't do any federal work. Most of my work is state and local government. And so many of the SCTC members are in the commercial space, which I love because that's the cross discipline that I would love to learn from. And that's frankly the partnering folks that I want to work with. So again, searching the internet, and again, the keynote here is that you can always find something that endorses or supports your line of thinking or your posture and stuff. So as I was looking at this stuff, again, I was finding interesting numbers. I found some that said there are 800 million or 800,000 consultants in the market. This one says there's 27 million. Well, the thing that makes me scratch my head on this one is I just had a colleague who did some booth standing here this month, and he had no less than 7 people come up to him and say, you know, I'm going to take the golden parachute. I hate my job. I'm going to retire. But hey, you're a consultant. Hook me up. I want to go to work as a consultant. You know, I'm a smart guy. I still have something to offer. I want to be busy. You know, suit me up. And so from that perspective, it's like, well, there's hunters and there's gatherers. And this individual, my colleague, has a recent experience with folks who retired and really weren't invested in consulting. And so that's kind of a danger. But again, flexible teams of associates, this is going to be the way of the future. The big consulting firms are challenged, but then they always have permanent clients. So again, we're looking at small providers looking for lots and lots of engagements. But again, some of these sources had something interesting to say. The rise of boutique consulting firms, quality, faster implementation, better value. So that has to be part of the messaging as we approach clients and why we explain our teaming. When I grew up in consulting, there was always a little bit of suspicion about what they call lash ups. And that was the old phrase where all these consultants came together for a team and then they proposed together, as opposed to a firm that had a huge bench and lots of employees who were under salary. And that gave the clients a certain amount of assurance that the work would be finished and finished well, and it had a single point of contact. So I think we've solved that puzzle. But again, we still have to sell the value. So again, quoting from one of these providers, I think they hit the nail on the head. They're shifting client expectations, and I'm sure we all have stories about, well, a client reached out to us and it's a little bit different. Sometimes the sales cycle was collaborative. You'd have a conversation with a client, you would hone in the approach, and then you would give them a proposal. And now a lot of clients are just saying, I want you to do X. And they tell you what they want. And if you can't do it, don't want to do it, can't do it affordably, then they're often running to somebody else. And so having a sticky relationship with clients is very challenging. Again, the consulting paradigms, there used to be a life cycle to consulting. You'd start with a client at a very strategic level. You would help them identify and scope problems. You would come up with alternatives, give them implementation plans, help them through procurements, project management, et cetera. The life cycle is kind of gone now. Everybody is thinking strategically. They already have the life cycle in mind. They're going to invite you in at a certain portion of that life cycle because they need a thing done. Likewise, getting that conversation going, distinguishing your services, and making sure the client recognizes your value and gives you that invitation to go to work. So Forbes, this is a little
Bill, sorry.
but
No, just
yes.
interrupt. So you were talking about the idea that clients need you for a specific part of that whole life cycle, as you were just sharing with it. So what do you think is being, the super specialization and not the whole thing?
So my experience, again, I've been doing consulting for 30 years now. I don't look at, but the traditional approach was that clients really didn't know what their problems were, and they needed somebody to help define them. And I think people are a lot more astute about what their issues are. And so now they're looking for specialists. They think they've got their finger on the button and they want some help with that specific button. I've seen very few opportunities to come in at the beginning of what I call a life cycle to say, hey, we have a strategic initiative. We want to do something. We want to automate for the first time. We want to open up a new office. We want to do a new thing. And so we want the proper planning done at the beginning. And then if that comes out well, then we want you to carry us through the entire life cycle, which could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, well, then the other part of this is that even that, if that's the case, which it is, and to some degree or a large degree, depending upon who the client is and what their general needs are, what their staffing is, and where they are, in terms of their insourcing, outsourcing models. But also it's about once you're in there, right, there's all kinds of other things that you can discover, right? And therefore, maybe I walk in there on a general UC engagement, and then, by the way, one of the questions is about E911, and then they don't really have a real strategy, and they need to because they're a large organization, and if it's private, it's multi-site, it's multi-state, et cetera, and therefore that could be, someone like yourself. So yeah, your thoughts on that?
So I actually have a slide at the end. There's 6 magical steps of being a consultant.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. Go ahead.
Well, no, I think, Steve, you're much better at this than I am. That sales cycle with a client, there's a delicate balance in being responsive and having the client aware that you're trying to expand the scope somehow. You are asking probing questions to make sure you get the assignment right. But as you identify more opportunities, which the client may see as flaws or things that they didn't ask you about in the beginning, you run the risk of turning them aside. Hey, I want you to do this, but we're talking about something else, which is not really my focus right now.
Agreed.
So some of the things I don't know if anybody else, there's a lot of fee and price pressure now as well. A lot of the engagements I'm seeing, and again, Bill's world is responding mostly to requests for proposals from state and local government. The budgets for a lot of these projects are woefully unfunded. I have one client, they were given $24 million to open a dispatch center. Well, they asked for 24 million, they were given 10 and told to get as far as they could go. And so that kind of mindset, at least in my market space, is really prevalent. And trying to identify with the client again during the sales cycle to say, well, for X amount of dollars, we can get you so far down the road. But again, they're wary of change orders and an increasing level of service and more money that they're going to have to ask for in the future, which is not atypical, come to find out. A lot of clients are used to asking for more money every year as projects move forward, as long as you talk about success. So again, doing the research.
Sorry, but that's part of the story. You got to talk about previous successes. You got to give them examples and stories around what you've done for others and what were the results of those, right?
And thank you for that question, Steve, because as many others have found, is that your references are retiring. You may have had people who would be happy to answer a phone call from a prospective client and talk about you in glowing terms, and a lot of those folks are retiring. In my space, I don't have a lot of clients. If I have 3 or 4 clients a year, that's a great year. And so I don't have a huge bench of references. And so really a lot of the drivers for me doing development is to get more projects in the pipeline one way or another. So the networking is good, but again, having recent clients that you can reference is huge.
Well said.
I apologize. I was hoping to watch the chat channel, but it went away when I started screen sharing. So
I'm looking out for it. Nope, no one's saying anything.
Perfect. Thank you. So again, doing the research, and again, that's my flaw. I just want to know a lot about stuff before I talk about it. Found some interesting things. Technical AI is the word of the day, and I'll talk about that in my case study here. But if you don't have a messaging about AI and how it's either helping your work or can help client work or can help with their platforms and their customer service, then you really aren't going to get a lot of audience to it. Consultants also provide the analytics, a little bit of depth that the client may not have. Supply chain is interesting, but it's not really a core thing I think I'm interested in. But the soft skills, one of the things the pandemic taught us is that you have to be really good at Zoom. The opportunity to meet a client in person is probably the 1 or 2%. Even if you're willing to get on an airplane, the cost of sitting in an aircraft is just too huge now. I'm a million-mile flyer, and I used to love that kind of stuff, but it's just not available anymore. The hypothesis-driven problem solving, and I think this kind of speaks back to Steve's question. It's like, yeah, as you're having a conversation with the client, you know, it's okay to start talking about prospective solutions and alternatives. And that just adds to the conversation to say, you know, this really is a complex question. The one thing you wanted us to do has some ramifications. Have you thought them all through? So kind of to the meat, and I'm working from notes as well as the slides. This is kind of a summary of what I don't think anybody would disagree with is why you would team. The problem solving. I want to emphasize the exposure to alternative service models. When I talk about my case study, you know, the way I do projects was dramatically different from my team members. And I had different insights than they did. And we had some thoughtful conversations about ways to approach a client and to scope the services. And I think that's a good thing. You know, it's a learning experience on both sides. The diverse expertise, again, if you've had a lot of experience doing things a certain way, this kind of blows the lid off it to say, yes, there are other ways to do it that may be more efficient, more programmatic, higher margins. You should be writing these things down and learning from them. Productivity and growth, again, the breadth and depth of client references. One of the things I used to tell people in my elevator speech was, you know, in my career, I've done everything that happens in a dispatch center. And so the recent example is I found a dispatch center that I had not worked in. I went from 911 and emergency services dispatching to a transit and a paratransit dispatch center. And so I had a learning curve. That was something I wanted. I wanted a client reference in the transit space. So that was my incentive to team. Larger, more complex projects. I have examples on both ends of the spectrum. I have done single consultant projects in the hundreds of thousands of dollars with statewide impact. I've also done statewide projects with teams of consultants. It works both ways. I can tell you the individual projects at that dollar value come along infrequently. There's probably 2 or 3 in my career. So being able to team and get larger projects is essential. The communications, what we found in our case study is that we were getting together every day for about a 3-week period to put together the development. And so once you get the client engagement, it may not be that kind of pace, but that's what it takes to get it done. And we had the flexibility to do that. The last one, client relationship. Again, we're all talking about referrals. Having a happy client is a good thing, and that will pay off for years and years to come.
So Bill, hold on, back to the other slide. So you use that word trusted advisor. Okay, so we were actually, many of us were at Enterprise Connect this year, and there was a platinum sponsor called the Trusted Advisor, and they were an agent program. So, you know, just to put some caution to the wind, not with your slide, of course, but just with the term, we are trusted advisors, we are independent consultants, but the agents, I think, who are conceptually losing ground in the market, who is really our chief competition, at least in the boutique space, that's their claim to fame. We are the trusted advisor. Because they can't be, and they've actually used the word independent consultant too. I mean, that's almost like in a whole nother fireside chat, but yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting how that has played out. But again, if you're ever running, you know, into an agent program, you know, there's ways to work through it, especially with state and local government. But go ahead, Bill. I can bring that back to you later.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to misquote Roberta. You know, the only thing you sell is knowledge, time, and trust. It's a little slippery because, again, when I began my career, the independence of the consultant was important because you had so many providers in the marketplace. Having a consultant that was independent of all those providers so that the client felt that they made a good choice is kind of slipping away. What we found is, and this was an integrator space, I have competitors that will take products and they will be responsible for the overall implementation, which includes subcontracting the providers. And they don't seem to have been harmed a bit in the independence and clients viewing them as being independent. I would debate that, but again, in our case study, it's like, yeah, we had a third-party product we wanted to provide as part of a consulting engagement. And everybody was pretty comfortable with that because it was a tool that gave the client capability and it was replaceable. I mean, there was one product, but there were many providers. Is that fair?
Sure.
So best practices. I didn't come up with a slide, but I'll just kind of talk you through what the case study was. So probably everybody saw the email I sent a few weeks back soliciting interest in participating on a solicitation. It was a customer service training for a transit agency with a focus on paratransit. And so paratransit has call takers, dispatchers, drivers, etc. And I thought that was interesting. Again, I wanted that as a reference. It kind of expands my professional portfolio. So I got it, I read it, I found some gaps in my expertise, and that's why I reached out because frankly, I don't do a lot of customer call centers, large, high volume customer centers. My space is 911 call taking. It's easy to prioritize it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to get smart about what makes a paratransit dispatch center different. And there are some interesting touch points about that. So I reached out to SCTC members. I think I got 3 replies and started that dialogue to say, can we check all the boxes on what the client is asking for? And we did. We needed a training partner. We needed a technology partner. We needed a QA partner. And we started crafting a work plan that we thought was responsive to the solicitation. So when we talk about best practices, one of the things that needs to be explicit at some point is what's in it for me. Everybody has to understand that this is worth their effort. And so as we start putting together the work plan and describing the hours and the resource requirements and the fees, people start to, the bulb starts to shine sort of thing that says, yep, this is a good project for me. I'm going to make some money on it. I think I want to continue. And so one of the key takeaways is you're continuously qualifying an engagement. It's not like Bill has a great idea. He wants to chase this. Although in this case, it was exactly that. And I think I may have been taking hostages at some point. So part of the business case was that we're putting a lot of effort into this work plan. If they don't pick us, I don't want this work product to be abandoned. I want to reuse it. So the good news is there are about 6,000 transit agencies in the US who are probably good candidates for an upgrade in their customer service training. So that was kind of the business case that said, yep, we're going to make money on this one, maybe not as much as we'd like to, but as we repackage this to others, now we start making better margins on it. Kind of watching the time and trying to get through all
Oh,
the
no,
slides.
you're good. Yeah, you got plenty. Yep.
Let's see.
So hold on. So just, to interrupt here. So what was your case study? What was the example that drew you to this particular, slide presentation there, Bill, and Fireside Chat today?
So I teamed with an SCTC member and another trainer, and that trainer had a great index of people who also provided training. The nuance of the customer service training was they wanted the call takers and the operators to provide a certain amount of empathy to disabled passengers. And so here's the quandary. As I started to research this, it's like, well, who else provides this? I do a lot of competitive analysis. And so I found that there's a lot of customer service training available in the transit space for free. And so we were literally competing against free. And so we had to describe a value added proposition. Part of the proposal included an AI development for scenarios. They were indifferent on whether this was remotely provided training, hybrid training, in-person training, but they really wanted scenarios. They wanted each of their members to actually go through scenarios with different challenges and then be able to evaluate those. And my SCTC partner had some experience with an AI company, and that's exactly the product. You describe a customer, you can interact with them. It gives you feedback on your empathy, adherence to protocols. Did you ask the right questions? Did you provide the right information? It scales it. It has a lot of nuance to the voice that you're using to deal with the customer. And we thought that was a perfect match. The plus was they also have a product that provides QA. And so now the QA product is constantly, persistently monitoring the conversations and giving real-time feedback to the call takers and the dispatchers. And then again, giving that real-time feedback, which was unique. We didn't see a sales opportunity here because as the client was disclosing their QA process, it was pretty much the supervisors get together once a month and talk about the hard cases. And so it's like, well, that was going to be a leap, coupled with the fact that that AI product was very expensive on a per user basis. It was like, well, let's just put that back in the quiver. We may have an opportunity to talk about it and sell it later, but let's get in there. Let's meet the requirements of the solicitation, get the work, and then introduce them to what state-of-the-art call centers actually do.
So let me pause with you for a second because we had a similar study that we just did for another client. So I'm sure there was an ROI on the AI model, right? I don't know if you got that far, but that's how we were able to get it past the initial stage, for lack of a better word.
So ROI in lowercase letters. We did our own analysis of what the per person cost of providing the training was. Again, we were calibrating against zero. Again, with the competitive analysis, there are companies that do this as a course of business. You know, they do learning programs, they stand up learning management systems. They are very, very capable. Sometimes it's just a matter of the timing. One of the footnotes to this is in state and local government, and I have an entirely different presentation about RFPs and procurement in public sector. But the good news is that anybody who asks for these solicitation materials is published. So all of a sudden I get the plan holder list, and now I can go one by one to see who my competition is. And I can find out who I need to be concerned about. I can look at their qualifications. I can look at their products, their service offerings, their quals, their references. And frankly, I write half of my proposal against the requirements of the solicitation. The other half is I write against my competition. Because it's competitive, I want the client to see us as a better option, more cost effective, more responsive, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't believe that the client had an ROI on their call center at all.
Right.
What they did have is a pain point. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we've noticed that AI, first of all, we're in the early stages of AI, right? We're still in this super hype cycle. The market is moving so quickly that as Cognigy shared, several weeks ago, that we're talking cat years here, right? So something that's a year old is actually, almost 10 years later in the world of AI, so to speak, So but in order to get it stuck, I think people are willing to invest in it. But it also has to be controlled, meaning there can't be any hallucinations. And again, I know I'm going off topic here a little bit, specific to AI, but you also have to have a hard ROI on it. So we have this client example where their SLAs are terrible. And we're very engaged with them, and we have a new CIO and he wants to look at AI. So we actually looked at bots, okay, as a front end for basic stuff, almost like the equivalent of IVR, or anything to make an appointment, or anything for, this was healthcare, so it could be a prescription refill, which are all tied to the CRM EHR system with the vendor, and therefore you have a controlled environment without a lot of hallucinations, no connection to ChatGPT or anything along those lines. And the savings are significant. In this case, it was like on 200 agents, we were talking $2 million net per year savings. And then he went upstairs to the president and told him we need to do this project. So that's kind of how it got sold. But yeah, that's a good example to complement what we just shared there, Bill.
So there are 2 points I'd like to share. The first is we were in a very earnest dialogue with the AI provider because their pricing model hit a wall where it didn't make any sense for us. One of the things one of the things in their pricing model is that if you put a trainee through the program, that's a permanent record in their software. And I didn't delve too far into the licensing or their business case to
Mhm.
say, well, why would you do that? I mean, we were expecting 30% turnover in the client's call center. So there's
Mhm,
30% of the records that are meaningless. I mean, the employee went away, but we're still
Mhm.
being charged by the AI provider because you're maintaining the static data. And so
Mhm.
again, we were suggesting it's like, well, the current number of users, if we have 150 students, paying for 150 is pretty straightforward. That's sensible. But having it go from 150 to 180 to 210 to 240, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera, in perpetuity and continue to pay this
Mhm.
escalating fee is a non-starter. So you have to rethink that.
Yeah, it sounds like the vendor's pricing model was weird, for lack of a better word, or strange, or not
Well,
necessarily. But again, we're also dealing with all new models, in the market. So there's no standards
yeah.
yet, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and I tripped over a statistic. There's something like 40 new AI platforms created every day. It's a couple of smart people. They're going to graduate from college. They've got this great idea. I mean, that's literally the story of a business that I tripped over. And they're coming up with application-specific uses for AI, but they're all coming to the market. They really don't understand the market, and they're just
Right.
dipping their toe in it. And again, part of the challenge is to say, okay, let's say I have 100 AI providers and I have an application. How am I going to vet 100 providers in a 3-week period and pick one, and then have a focused conversation about a specific client opportunity and price it? I mean, a lot of the solicitations I have a 4-week open date. Okay,
Mm.
in that 4 weeks, I have to form a team, I have to write a proposal and get it in on time. And so
Mm.
now, again, my challenge is I have to be very selective about third-party providers of things that I don't know
Mhm.
much about.
Mm.
So the other thought as you were talking is, let me suggest that there's a different market. Um, Much of your experience may be with large organizations that are very experienced in call centers. In the 911 space and in other smaller call centers, I would suggest that there's a great opportunity because they have not leaned into automation. They've just been doing the
Mm.
same thing manually. They've been forcing their protocols, their business case, and just staffing up and down, doing rudimentary QA on customer service. And they've struggled, I say
Mhm.
struggled, but they've survived for this amount of time. And so part of my challenge is to open their eyes to say, this is not contemporary technology. This is not how you
Mm.
manage a call center of any size. Customer service is much better, much more rich than the way you're trying to deal with it. And so, yes, I have one project and one invitation to do some work with you. I hope to be your trusted advisor and help you, raise up your offerings and make your customer service better. One of the touch points in our case study is that in transit, much of it is funded by the federal government, and the feds have a very well-defined complaint process. If you're disabled and you have an issue with the paratransit provider, here's the steps it takes for you to complain, and it has visibility at the federal government. There's the
Mm.
pain point. The ROI is not having to answer to the federal government and put your funding in jeopardy because you're getting a plethora of complaints. And that's really tough to put an ROI on.
Mm. Yeah, no, agreed. We actually met with an insurance company just over a week ago, and we are totally overemphasizing the idea that you can leverage ROI using our services. Specific in this case was actually personnel, right sizing personnel, because they're moving to a cloud solution, very deep on Cisco, premise-based UCCE contact center and UC, and they're very interested in talking about Teams, which we will talk about Teams and competitors to Teams, as well as the fact that again they're overstaffed on staff once they move away from Cisco. So it was easy to talk about. Even if we just did one FTE, that easily pays for everything that we were, providing in terms of services, more than enough. So therefore, our net cost
Yeah.
for our services was less than zero. So, when do we sign, so to speak, So let me ask you, Bill, I got a couple of quick questions here. So,
Okay.
how can another firm pull you as 911, as your firm into a project?
Phone call or an email. Well, in my
But
website is
what would trigger them contacting you as an example here?
I think that's the challenge, the awareness to other consultants
Mm-hmm.
of what we all
Agreed.
do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing called a qualifications statement in the federal space, and it's a one-pager. And a third of the page is just contact information and your classification codes. And the other two-thirds of it is just a real quick bullet list of what you do and what you're proficient in. And that's supposed to
Sure.
be sufficient for a purchasing agent to say, yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
look like you do what we do. And you go in the stack. And then
Mm-hmm.
that stack gets the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for a consultant. For me in particular, I reached out to SCTC. There are thousands of consulting firms in the US. Some are such direct competitors, I don't want them to know anything about what I'm doing, but the majority are interesting to
Mm-hmm.
me. What skills can you bring to the table? What are complementary skill sets?
Mm-hmm.
How can we find opportunities to team to pursue clients? And I don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
feast on your existing clients. I want to find new clients. I think there's enough opportunity in the market. You're talking about your clients and they have all this integration. My case study, they said nothing about CRM. They said nothing about their telephone system. And it's like, well,
Mm.
you have some automation. People can use their cell phone to schedule rides, but you didn't talk about it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how can you talk about customer service and, you know, the expectations of customer service and quality without mentioning your platform and your systems?
Mm-hmm.
So that I don't want to say that they're a naive buyer, but in a lot of cases they are. They just don't know enough about their problem.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, what are some of the value adds that, again, I'm just putting you on the spot here, Bill.
Mhm.
But, and again, not that we're doing a pitch here, but, if someone wanted to bring you in, right, as your company, what would some of the value that you would bring outside, obviously, of your E911 expertise? What's some unique strategies or values or value adds that you provide? You're supposed to
Okay.
say like 24/7 availability, contact me at 2 a.m. in the morning.
This is the humble brag component. What I think my value add to a project, now I'm just bragging sort of thing. During the pandemic, I leaned into a lot of different disciplines. I had a lot of time to partake in online training. I
Mm-hmm.
leaned into quality assurance.
Mm.
I built up my resume. Um, I like to think that all of this stuff builds the toolbox. As
Mm-hmm.
you saw in some of the other slides, bringing different methodologies to the table to say, yeah, I'm going to take this from change management and this from project management and this from IDLE and this from ASQ, and to bundle it all together and say, this is very focused. There's not a lot of fat in this. It's not like, yeah, let's try and do ISO 9001. We're going to be
Mm-hmm.
very laser focused on what the client wants. And I think that's the creative part of consulting, discerning what the client's issues are and helping them get to resolution as quickly as
Sure.
possible and cost effectively. Again, a lot of my clients don't have a lot of extra money to spend. They need to desperately spend it smartly.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Agreed. So, we talked about E911 a lot, right, in the early stages when the compliance hit, right, a couple of years ago. And so now the market's matured. So, but I'm sure there are still, in fact, I know there are, right, E911 opportunities. So, what I'd like you to do is maybe just make a quick list of key questions, maybe 5 to 10 to 12, whatever the questions would be. And I'll share it with the membership. Okay. But I think it's an important point, because for those of us that have clients that are larger, that, hey, we never talked about E911, let's talk about it, as an example here, and it's obviously we want to partner with one another. We want to share each other's expertise. We want to grow the organization through partnerships. And, this is just one example as to how we're doing it, So
Yeah.
why don't you put that together for me, Bill? And I can share that, of course, on the listserv. Okay.
Well, and I will. I will remind people that after the Next Gen 911 initiative at SCTC, several consulting firms leaned into that heavily, and they have whole market practice areas now for Ray Bombs and Carey's Law.
Mm.
And so, people saw the opportunity and they leaned into that.
Mhm.
I would love to hear if they're getting any success. Again, that initiative is years old now. And at this point, yes, there are probably a few that haven't implemented it. They have some risks. Again, if they're not inviting you in to look at that problem, you're probably just exposing a risk that they just didn't want exposed.
No, and I agree. In fact, I spoke to a Canadian counterpart just the other day and was sharing that the Canadians are years ahead of the US. And so maybe we can tap into them on some of this next gen 911. So obviously their market is nowhere near ours in terms of line size, but yeah. So, just additional, thoughts to consider. So, hey, we're close to the top of the hour. Bill, I really appreciate you, sharing your insights here. This is great stuff, I think, for all of us. What were the two books? I'm sorry, I cut you short on the two books. Go ahead.
So the Friend and Foe was recommended by one of the teaming members, and she thought this was a great reference. The other one, I've owned this book for years, and I think anybody who's doing consulting needs to have read this at some point. Even though the thing is dated, all the principles of a management consulting firm and staffing and being a consultant are still valid. And so this still has a prominent place on my bookshelf.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, and then last slide, and we're good to go, Bill. So this is your contact information, of course, and we look forward to sharing again, Bill. And thanks for contributing today. Thanks for being on, and thanks everybody for joining today. And we will all see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bill.